This is Steve Woodruff coming to you from Franklin, Tennessee, and it is my pleasure, if you haven't met Alana Muller, to introduce her to you, a friend I met through social media many years ago and in Kansas City, and we're now both housebound and trying to figure out how to network in a time of crisis.
That's exactly right. Hello, Steve. I'm so delighted to see you even across the miles and across the information superhighway. It's great to be connected, and I know this is such a strange time for so many of us when we are feeling isolated, and I guess the expression is sheltering at home.
Mhm.
And so, it's so good to feel like we actually have connections that we can rely on that help to break up some of the monotony of being homebound and really away from other people.
Well, you and I met through networking. We both
We
had a
did.
strong interest, even like 8, 10 years ago, in the whole
Yeah.
principle of networking and social media. We've both written books that touch very strongly on that. And now, in the middle of this crisis, we are having to see either new levels of networking happen or a resumption of the way networking should be or whatever it is. But we both have been thinking a lot about, what role does networking have in this particular crisis? And I thought we'd have a nice talk about that and see if we can bring out some advice or some ideas for others that are sheltering at home or struggling with, where's my business going? How am I going to get new business? How can networking help with that?
Yeah.
I think when we first met, neither of us were published authors, I think. Or
Well,
was your Coffee Lunch Coffee book
I
out
think
yet?
Coffee Lunch Coffee had just come out. So I published it in 2012. So we might have just met, or maybe we were on the sort of the precipice of this. So
Yes.
so it's been quite a while ago though, and it's funny, we were both trying to remember how it was that we actually connected, and I honestly have no recollection. As I was sharing with you before, I feel like our lives are so intertwined, and we've sort of come in and out of each other's lives to help with business and bouncing ideas off of one another. And I want you to know how important our friendship has been to me. And you were one of the first people to reach out to me when all this coronavirus talk really began to get heightened in the last few weeks. And I can't tell you how much that meant. And in fact, I wrote a blog post and I talked about just that feeling of being well cared for, and knowing that, again, across distance, across miles, across the internet, that it's nice to know that we have friends who care, people who are actually there for you, even when we're not allowed to be together in person. So I want to thank you for that. I claim to be a master networker, and I'm glad to know actual master networkers like yourself. So thank you for that. So I think that, right now people are just feeling so much fear and confusion. I know for myself, I've gone in and out of restlessness, anger, confusion, very emotional swings up and down. And it's I think it's mostly because we just don't know. This is such a foreign experience for so many of us, especially those of us who like to be surrounded by other people. And so I'm so delighted that you and I have been engaged in this conversation, and that now we have a chance to really bring others into the conversation. And my hope is that really we can give people some tips, thoughts, ideas, and some hope going forward that not only will they be okay, but their businesses will also be okay. And that maybe this is testing not only our technological capabilities and knowledge of online tools and social media, social networking, but really helping us as human beings find different and maybe better ways to connect with each other through conversation, and in a way that, I don't know, it really does provide hope and access to one another in ways that we didn't really see before.
Well, you have thought a lot about networking and what it is and what it isn't. So, in your book, Coffee Lunch Coffee, which is one of the more interesting titles, because I think it would be good for you to explain very briefly what that means. But tell us what you think networking really is and what it isn't in
Yeah.
this age of social networks, of video, and of more and more busyness and noise?
Sure. Well, okay. So first, the title. My super dark secret is that I don't drink coffee. So this is not about consumption. I know. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Are you going to be okay? I'll give you a moment. Yeah, yeah. This is not about coffee. When years and years ago, when I first began networking in earnest, it was really the result of a career transition that I decided to make. And I thought that if I could structure my days around the days of the kinds of people that I wanted to connect with, that eventually those individuals would say yes, that they would actually meet with me. And so I structured my days around three meeting times: a morning time slot, a midday meeting time slot, and an afternoon meeting time slot. And I called sort of that spread of the calendar or the day, I called that uh, coffee, lunch, coffee, morning, midday, and afternoon, and it stuck. And so, people got it. Even the people like me who didn't drink coffee, they understood that when you say, hey, do you want to meet for a cup of coffee? It could actually be a glass of wine, or it could be a walk, or it could be a visit in somebody's office. It was less about, again, the consumption of food or beverage and more about the consumption of people. And so that's where coffee, lunch, coffee comes from. And, I have given a lot of thought to what is networking. And what I find is it's often good to begin with what networking is not. And so let me start with that for our listeners today. I say that networking is not about money, and it's not about finding a job, and it's not about making sales, although those are all really good outcomes of the networking process. Networking is also not about collecting a pocket full of other people's business cards. So while I actually believe that there is still a very important, appropriate place for business cards, collecting other people's cards is not the point. So this is less about sort of that physical, tactical gathering of cards, and much more about, are you establishing meaningful, quality connections with other people? And so now the actual definition. So if networking is not about money or sales or jobs, what could it possibly be? And so I say it is really comprised of three things. It is connections, community, and belonging. I believe that as human beings, we have a need deep in our DNA to connect with other people. Even the introverts among us, we still have this human need to connect with others. And the way that we fulfill or satisfy that need is we establish community. We establish community everywhere we go. So you and I, today, we are a community. We are joined by our listeners. We're expanding our community even as we sit here talking, because people are participating with us. And so whether you're sitting down one-on-one, face-to-face for a cup of coffee with somebody, or across the miles via Zoom or some other technology, we are creating community. So people have the community of their neighborhoods, they have the community of their work or their office space, maybe their alma mater, their family. We're creating community everywhere we go. And I believe the reason that we do this is to deepen our own sense of belonging. It turns out that belonging feels really good. It felt really good when you reached out to me to make sure that I was, doing okay, surviving this crisis, both, mentally, emotionally, business-wise. So it felt good to belong to something, to belong to somebody. And so we are constantly trying to deepen our own sense of belonging because of that good feeling. And frankly, belonging to something bigger than ourselves feels even better. And so when you ask, what is the definition of networking? That's what I say it is: connections, community, and belonging.
So, how has your networking changed, either
Mm,
become more difficult or become more fulfilling in the last few weeks as we've moved
yeah.
closer and closer to this sort of quarantine and wide open question of what the future is?
Yeah, for me, and really for every human being on this earth, it's just so strange to think about. I've given a lot of thought to, so what does it really mean to feel connected to people? And so if truly, if, as I say, if networking really is just connections, community, and belonging, how can we do that when we can't actually be together or see each other? And so, I've given it a lot of thought, and I've come up with kind of my short list. And one thing is simply checking in with people, just as you did with me. In fact, one of the early connections that I had was a girlfriend of mine from college, a very good friend of mine. There's kind of a group of four of us that have remained very, very close. And, we live, all across the country, and we have our very busy and active lives. So we do not talk every single day. But I have to say, this group of girls is a group that no matter, despite the passage of time, when we come back together, it's like no time has gone, since the last time we visited. And she sent this late night text to the group and just said, I'm thinking about you. Let's just all maybe try to stay connected, a text once a day or even once a week, just to make sure that we're all doing okay. And so some of it is just checking in. It's just making sure that everybody's doing okay. The second thing that I myself am trying, but honestly, I have to admit, it was the result of seeing a lot of social posting going on. And that was, people started offering to help. And so whether it was, if you are, for example, if you're a senior, if you're somebody who's not feeling well, if you're simply afraid, let me sort of bear the burden for you of going to the grocery store, of getting your food, of picking up your dry cleaning, of walking your dog. It's the simple offer to help. And, for me, when I first began networking in earnest, that offer to help was a fundamental question that people asked me that changed my life. It was truly a fundamental change in the way that I thought about human interaction. It's simply, what can I do to help? What can I do to help?
Yeah,
And
I've seen a whole lot of that, not only just in online, but here in my community, here in Middle Tennessee, the amount of activity of people reaching out to their neighbors, both live or in online platforms, and help with delivering food, or, I need a ladder, or my kid needs a ride. And there's this amazing community and belonging that often doesn't seem to come to the surface until we have a problem like this.
You're exactly right. And of course, I think we're all hearing the stories of, the angry shopper at Costco. And so I know that emotions are so heightened right now. We are hearing some of those negative stories, but I have to admit, I've heard way more of this happy, positive story where people really are offering to help. Others are accepting the help, which is sometimes a difficult thing. But, I have, my closest friend actually is in his 70s, and he even said to me this morning, he's like, I have to admit, I'm never freaked out. I'm a little freaked out right now. And this is a person in perfectly good health, feels good, active lifestyle, and yet really scared right now. And so I do think if we can simply offer to help, that's a big deal.
That's a great point. I've had someone that I've known for many, many years, who is a single mom. And she's been feeling very sick for a couple of weeks. And the amount of fear and concern, and she lives, a long way away, so I can't be near anybody anymore. But I'm not a fearful person. I don't typically feel a lot of fear. And I can lose touch with the fact that other people can really experience a tremendous amount of difficulty and fear. And for me, it's been a real reminder that I need to not assume that people are okay, because I tend to glide through things without being, all messed up. What I see often, what I'm seeing on Facebook and others, is people, like you've mentioned, people who never seem to express any kind of fear, saying, I'm a little freaked out right now.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things you can do, and this is actually on my hit list too, is coffee by call. And so even your single mom friend, what a great way to make her feel a little less alone is just coffee by call. And everybody grab whatever your favorite beverage is. I'm well caffeinated, even though I don't drink coffee. So lots of tea going on in my house.
You never lack for energy, I don't think.
No, maybe that's the reason I don't drink it. I know what it could do. So, but I think, reconnecting, I've mentioned it several times, even in the course of this conversation, just when you reconnected with me last week, that just was so nice. And I think, every day, think of one person that you want to reconnect with and reach out. They're going to be delighted to hear from you, because they're feeling just as alone and isolated and sequestered as you are. And so, whether you're concerned during this time or not, especially for people who have been working from home for a long time, tell people how do you do this? How does it work? How do you make sure that you don't just completely shut down and stay within yourself, but connect with other people?
That's a great point, because some
It's
of
a
us are
big
used
one.
to it. I'm used to
Yeah,
working on my own. I'm a loner anyway.
exactly.
So this for me has almost been like, yeah, oh, okay, yeah,
What's the
go,
difference?
no big deal for me. Uh,
Yeah,
as much as I really love being with people, I love one-on-one time as opposed to
yeah.
big crowds. So it's no sacrifice for me to not be in big crowds. I'm like, okay, bring it. That's cool.
You're like, I can
Uh,
do this all day long. No, I get it. You know, and the last thing I'd offer for people is collaborate. Do what you and I are doing. You know, we haven't done this before together, but it's an awesome opportunity to actually give it a try.
Yeah, and I think that's a great note to end on, as far as what we can think about going forward, and what you're
Yeah.
thinking about, and what I'm thinking about is, now that we're a week or two into this, we're all trying to find our feet and figure out, all right, what's this new normal? One of the first things that comes to my mind, and to your mind, is, all right, what new ways can we collaborate to try
Yeah.
to create value for others, and
Well,
to try to make business happen when it doesn't seem to be happening.
Well, I totally agree with that. And, you know, actually, one of the things I remember from your book, from Clarity Wins, is you talk a lot about this concept of referral networking. And I would love for you to explain what you mean by referral networking. I think that could be enormously helpful because, again, you've been working from home for a while. You have a sense for what it means to be a business owner and working on your own. And yet you've really built a business, I believe, at least from my perspective, on referral networking. And in Clarity Wins, when you share this, I'd love for you to offer to our audience what it is that you think that means and how people might be able to use it right now.
So networking is wonderful in and of itself, and I enjoy it. But I see networking also as a really important means to an end, which is, if referrals are the best way for any of us to get business, and
Mhm.
we know that it is, we know that referrals are the best business, then we need to network with the intent of helping another person clearly understand what we do,
Mhm.
so that they can refer us. So, uh, unless I know who your clients are and what exactly you do for them and what their felt pain is that you're fixing, unless
Mhm.
you are able to paint for me a portrait, or if I have to be able to paint for you a portrait of my ideal client, then you don't know who to refer me to, and I don't know who to refer you to.
Mhm.
So it's great to get to know somebody, but one of the things that I feel is really important for any professional is to be able to sum up who we are and what we do and what our value is in these very small word packages that can be transmitted and stuck in the memory of someone else, so they know how to refer us.
Well, I mean, it kind of reminds me of, I think this is an overused expression, but the elevator pitch or the 30-second commercial, but it's really honing that, especially right now when words matter and people tend to have short attention spans. So I think
Mhm.
some of that is not only being clear or using your word clarity, being clear not only in our own minds, but the words that we share with others so that people can sort of speak that back. And it's not a difficult task to explain, oh yeah, I know exactly what Steve does. In fact, let me tell you, I think you could benefit from his services.
Well, it's important that we give people as compact and as memorable a description as possible, because the fact is, we all have a million things going on in our heads. And now, with the corona crisis, we have even more noise and distraction pouring into our mind.
Yeah.
So I can't remember 27 things about Alana.
Yeah.
If I can remember one, that's good.
Well,
And
so for yourself, how do you describe your business? Like, what do you have, like a one-liner or a tagline that you're using to share what clarity
I
is?
use
Or
metaphors. My goal in working with anybody is to try to get the message into a compact sentence, and even better, into a metaphor. So the title, which was bestowed upon me by Chris Brogan some years ago on my Facebook timeline, he said, "Happy birthday to the King of Clarity."
love it.
And I looked at that and I said, wow, that's pretty bold. And my New England self was a little resistant about taking on such a presumptuous title.
That's
But
why you moved to Tennessee.
yeah, that's right. But the branding was so effective. I just said, okay, I'm gonna run with that because, what does it say? Clarity is my keyword. And hey, there's only one king. Now, it may be that there are a million other people in the world that can help somebody find clarity. But if someone owns the title King of Clarity, who are you going to remember? You're going to remember the King of Clarity, not 25 other unknowns with descriptions that can't be recalled.
That's great.
So when you talk about a business, if you can get a business down to they are the Mercedes of this, or this is the King of Clarity, or this is the master of networking, or
Yeah.
any of these other types of labels, those are the things that get into people's heads, stay in their heads, and they can make referrals easy because it's not 12 bullet points, it's a phrase. So I believe that actually the biggest competitive advantage any business can have is what I call a memory dart, which is, I don't like elevator pitch. Elevators, nobody wants to be pitched in an elevator anyway.
Right.
So a memory dart is something sharp and that goes right to the bullseye and can stick in somebody's mind so that even a year later they can say, oh, yeah, you need to talk to so-and-so because so-and-so is the master of that.
I love it.
And that's how we can activate referrals and referral networking.
Well, so let's talk a little bit more about that, especially basically in light of the current situation. So call it what you will, the corona crisis, the pandemic. A friend of my son said the global crisis pandemic, which seems very sort of, I don't know, redundant,
I love those words, yep.
It's a tough time, but people still, once we sort of get over the mania, we need to get back to business. So from your perspective, how should we be rethinking our business during this time? And frankly, I guess using this as a benchmark for how we might operate in times of any crisis, whether it is this dramatic and wide-reaching, far-reaching, or even something a little bit less dramatic that might be more localized or more specific to an individual or a geographic area. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, this has forced me to rethink a certain aspect of clarity. So I've always focused on the big picture, long-term approach to clarity. This is what your business does. This is where you're going. This is your direction. This is your message. This is it. And it's hard enough to get a business to focus on one message, one clientele, get on a course. That's tough. However, when a crisis like this hits, all of a sudden we've got to start rethinking about what are we offering and what is our message, because it may be that in a marketplace of uncertainty and fear, which is what we are entering in a way that I don't think has ever occurred in our lifetime.
No.
All of a sudden the rules are not the same. People aren't making long-term investments. People are afraid to buy things. People don't want to think about the long term. We are selling into an environment of nearly stark terror. And so what we have to do is say, okay, here's who I am and what I do. Here's what my company does. How can I repackage this to meet this short-term need? And so there's this need for short-term clarity, pivoting, repackaging, that I think is the greatest need right now. Once this thing passes, we can get back to the long term. But we see lots of businesses doing this kind of pivoting. So restaurants are now, pushing takeout and delivery. It's food preparation, it's feeding people, but it's changing the mode, changing the message to we're going to get you food fast in a way that's safe.
Right.
And I'm seeing lots of businesses starting to try to adjust, because you got to take what you've got, take your core, and then say, all right, if we're going to go into this environment, what will people buy? What can they buy? What do they need? And it may be a different message. So we may have to have a short-term change of clarity for the current situation.
Well, okay, so let me put you on the spot. we're sort of in the midst of this lockdown. I don't know what's going on in Middle Tennessee, but in Kansas City, starting tomorrow for counties on both sides of the state line. I live on the Kansas side, but really there's been regional leadership. It's about 2.2 million people just in this regional area. And starting tomorrow, which will be Tuesday, March 24th, we will go into a 30-day lockdown. Yep. And so I think governments, I'll say, our local governments are trying to use gentle words like, this idea of staying at home, sheltering at home, as opposed to sheltering in place. So right. It's a little less apocalyptic. But the truth of the matter is we're not supposed to leave our house. It's stay at home is the order, literally stay at home, unless you need to go to the grocery store, if you have to get gas, if you have to go to the doctor or to the pharmacy. And other than that, nothing. And so my question for you is, in this time of lockdown, what are you doing to pivot? What are you offering, something different, something unique, something that maybe some of our listeners today could take advantage of?
Yeah, what I'm having to do is virtualize, for one thing. I've done some clarity sessions virtual over time, but most of my sessions have been half day, full day, a lot of times one-on-one or one with a small group. And that isn't happening right now. I mean, that's all being put off because that's long-term stuff. So what I've begun to do, and I'm still experimenting, this is a big experiment. Everything is an experiment right now. So I'm offering some people through referral, clarity by the hour, an hour session, hour and a half session. I am going to be this week unrolling some virtual tools and do live, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, walk people through templates, all for free, to try to help people gain short-term clarity in the midst of this. I don't know what I'm doing, Alana. I mean, I've done bits and pieces of this before, but I've never done it this way. I don't know where it's heading. I don't know if it's a long-term solution. So I'm going to be live evolving, as I have been all week and will be this week and will be the next week, how I do what I do. All of my pharma consulting business is on hold. I can't do anything about that. So I'm focusing on this one aspect of how can I help small businesses, individuals, consultants, others gain short-term clarity in this crisis. And I'm just going to pour myself into it and frankly, just see what happens.
So let me ask you two more questions. One is, if somebody wants to take advantage of this, how can they reach you? And then secondly, what does a clarity session include generically, understanding that you're going to be kind of changing it on the fly, and probably for each individual business or individual person, it may be slightly different. But can you describe a little bit what a clarity session looks like and then how they reach you?
A clarity session is, I used to call it clarity therapy because it's like a therapist. So it starts with a lot of questions. I do a lot of questioning. And while I'm pulling information out, what I'm looking for are the main themes, the success stories, the things that show what that business's uniqueness is. What's the value? What's the differentiator? And I pull that out and put words around it. And I call that hashtags. I actually try to bring every business down to a handful of hashtags that are the distinguishing marks. Then we take that and we turn that into tangible, here's what you would offer, here's what the client looks like, and really map out exactly. And you'd be shocked at how many businesses don't do this. They kind of reach out, very broad net. Nobody knows exactly what they do. So I try to help businesses focus on exactly what they do, exactly what the offering is, and then distill the message down to something that's so clear, so compelling and memorable that they can be what I call referral ready, get the messages out quickly. That's usually a half day process or a full day process, depending on the business. So what I do for clarity is pretty much always that, but I'm going to try to do a condensed version of it, and I'm going to try to do it in steps over a period of several days with people who will have to be sort of doing some homework on their own, maybe interacting with somebody else to help bounce things off of, because I can't do one-on-one sessions with everybody. And we'll see how, it can't hurt, and I think it can only help. So I'm just going to see how it goes.
Good.
And then,
Perfect.
for someone that wants to spend a one-on-one session with me for an hour or hour and a half or 2 hours, it's pretty much the process that I described, except right now we're probably going to focus more on the short term, although we'll touch on the long term, but we have
And
to
probably very
focus on the short.
condensed, right? Kind of a condensed version. How do people reach you?
Best thing is to just email me at steve@clarityfuel.com. Clarity Fuel is one word. On Facebook, I'm King of Clarity, and I can be found on LinkedIn, S. Woodruff as well. So any of those ways are easy for me. And
Perfect.
so what about you? What are you doing to package your approach and your offerings for people?
Yeah, similar to you, what my business is I say I'm a master networker, but my sort of short tagline is that I train people to build better, more meaningful professional relationships. And so much of my business is comprised of workshops, facilitation, lunch and learns, serving as a master of ceremonies, that kind of thing. And so, as you know, it's all on hold. And I would say
Yes.
the very good news is that nobody's canceled, but we are postponed for the foreseeable future. So I don't expect to be doing a lot of presentations or facilitation really until the fall at this point, hopefully sooner. And not longer from now. But another big part of my company is training people in terms of like one-on-one coaching, group coaching. And so actually I'm excited to say that the coaching aspect I think will actually pick up. I'll be doing something a little different. It'll mostly be virtual as opposed to face-to-face. I've done virtual before, but not to the degree that I'm doing now. So what I'm doing is I'm offering people kind of a discounted way to do networking coaching, which really is comprised of about 4 to 5 sessions. We would use either Zoom or freeconferencecall.com, something where we can see each other and maybe record the session so that they can utilize that information later. And what I'm hoping is that it gives people not only some hope, but some real tools that they can begin using immediately, and something really to keep them occupied and busy, and I would say not just resourceful, but productive during this time of uncertainty. And so I hope that people will reach out to me. People can reach me at Alana, that's ALANA, at coffeelunchcoffee.com. They can certainly visit also my website, coffeelunchcoffee.com. On Facebook, it's also Coffee Lunch Coffee.
Well,
And
you're
on
consistent.
LinkedIn, I know it's shocking. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Alana Muller, which is ALANAMULLER. So I
And of
hope to hear
course,
from you.
your book is Coffee Lunch Coffee as well, right? And that's
It
on
is.
Amazon.
It's all
So
Coffee Lunch
it's all
Coffee.
Coffee Lunch Coffee. And so if
Tea.
anybody's interested in my book, it's Clarity Wins, also available on Amazon. And that has a lot of the clarity principles that what I do for clarity sessions are embedded in there. So, let's figure out, Alana, what we're going to do over these coming days. It's going to be fascinating, and, it's going to make a whole bunch of business school case studies going forward, what people
That's
did
true.
during this thing. But my concern is that, we've got to help people not go out of business. We've got to help people survive and thrive. And if we can help them by building stronger networks, better messaging, sharper business approaches, then that's what I'm going to do. And, whether it has a long-term strategy or not, whatever, we've got to do what we've got to do.
Well, this has been a real pleasure, and I thank you for the opportunity to collaborate. I hope it's not only the first, but not the last.
Yes, it certainly
I think
won't
it'll
be.
be exciting. So it's a good start to sort of the next phase of our friendship. So thank you so much.
All right, Alana, great to talk to you.
Likewise.
Enjoy being stuck at home for a while.
You too.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.